All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to give folks a couple of moments to trickle in here. We're super excited to share the new Bonterra vision with you all on today's webinar. If you are here to learn more about the fundraising and engagement solution category, you are in the right place. My name is Amanda DeFonte. I'm our Senior Manager of Webinars and Virtual Events here at Bonterra. And I just wanted to take a couple of moments to share some quick housekeeping notes before I turn it over to the stars of today's show. First and foremost, we are recording today's session. We will share that recording with everybody here in about a week, along with the other two vision sessions. So you'll be able to re-review this, share it with your team as needed. We ask that you put any and all questions in the Q&A section here today. We'll do our best to get to them, but please ask them no matter what, so that we can follow up with you later as needed. I'll be here in the background if you need anything, but I am going to leave it there and let the important people take over today. And I'm super excited to introduce Bonterra CEO Scott Brighton. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Scott. I will let you take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Bonterra customers. Super thrilled to be here. We're going to pop some slides up and get started here. So today we're going to be focusing on our vision, both for the company, Bonterra, as well as specifically for our fundraising and engagement solutions. So let's plow ahead here. So a little bit about me. I know I've met a number of you. I've spent quite a bit of time over the last several months getting to know customers. I've now been with Bonterra roughly 5 months. I am a technology person at heart, grew up as a programmer, and have been in and around software for multiple decades. But I have a familiar and familial relationship to the social good space because my wife has been a long-standing executive director for a local nonprofit here in Austin, Texas. So I've been in and around both, it seems, for quite some period of time. Over the last 5 months, I've been spending the vast majority of my time with customers, and then also taking that feedback, taking that guidance, taking that exploration of things that you all need in crafting our go-forward strategy for where we want to take Bonterra and where we want to take Bonterra's products. And that is what we're unveiling today. So excited to jump into it. Before I do, on the next slide, I want to give you a little bit of an overview about Bonterra, because while many of you have been using the individual products for some time, you may be less familiar with Bonterra as a company because it was assembled only in 2022. It's the combination of more than a dozen best-of-breed software products from the social good space. And the original thesis is if we can bring all these different products together, connect them, share data, we can improve the impact of the individual products. The sum will be greater than the individual parts. And so Bonterra today, roughly 1,000 employees, over 20,000 companies. On the donor and funder side, we have over half the Fortune 100. We have a portfolio of 20 plus products across 3 major product categories. We support nearly $20 billion a year in annual giving and fundraising. And we have over 16,000 nonprofit organizations in our customer base. On the next slide, we are a private company, and we're owned by private equity. And private equity has admittedly something of a mixed reputation, but the private equity firm that owns us is Apax. And Apax was founded by an Egyptian immigrant who bootstrapped himself out of poverty to the United States and is known as the father of impact investing. And impact investing is basically the idea that it is no longer sufficient to invest simply for economic return. One must also invest for social return. And both of those things on a company's results report card should be of equal importance. And that is what Apax is trying to manifest in their investments, and their investment specifically in Bonterra is an example of that. Okay, so let's start with how we see the world based on the conversations that I've been having with you and others from our product group have been having. Our view is that the social good ecosystem is having something of an existential problem. If you look at total giving within the United States, and when we say total giving, we mean both giving of money as well as the economic value of volunteerism, the giving of time. That number today is about $620 billion a year. And while that's a big number in sort of an absolute sense, it pales in relation to the investment that is required to address society's most important problems. On this chart on the left, you can sort of get a visual of that relationship. The bigger circle is the size of solving, the estimated size of solving on an annual basis, climate change, world hunger, and US child poverty. It's estimated that would require $5.5 trillion a year. And so you can see the size of giving relative to the size of problems that you all are trying to attack. There's a big difference. And if you look at the growth rate in giving, we more or less know how fast it's going to grow in the future because it has been growing at the same rate for roughly 70 years. What is that rate? It's roughly the rate of US gross domestic product, which is about 2 to 2.5% a year. And at that growth rate, it's going to take a very long time for that 620 billion to approach the number that's required to tackle some of the world's and society's most important problems. Next slide. If you look then over a shorter time frame, and this is sort of the last 20 years, there are some trends that are candidly even more alarming. The participation rate for giving, the percentage of people that give in the United States, has declined from roughly 2/3 about 20 years ago to less than half today. Similarly, if we look at volunteerism, that's declined from nearly 1/3 of people volunteering in any given year to approaching 1/5 of people volunteering in any given year. And then if you look at donor retention, sort of the magic of sustainers, that's gone from half the folks roughly 20 years ago to now approaching 40%. So in the short term, the trends are sort of even more alarming about what's going on in social good. Next slide. The implication of this for all of you, of course, is on the one hand, we're seeing a record amount. All of you are reporting a record amount increase in demand. Over 2/3 of you have reported an increase in demand for the services that you're trying to provide as you tackle these big problems. But half of you have also reported that you're struggling to deliver due to these resource shortages, which inevitably is related to those trends we're seeing about, very slow growth in giving and volunteerism. So this situation is what we're trying to get under the covers of and sort of attack in our vision for where we want to take Bonterra and where we want to take our products. So let's sort of dive into that on the next slide and talk a bit about how we see what might be responsible for what's going on here. There's obviously lots of things happening, macroeconomic and otherwise, but there's something going on that's unique that isn't related to those macroeconomic trends because this is over a 70-year period. Our view, and there's lots of data to support this, that the key in social good and the key to encourage people to volunteer and to give is trust. If you look at what donors say when they are surveyed, they report the trust in the nonprofit as the single most important criteria they are looking for in deciding who to give to. And the number two is relationships, which is arguably a dimension of trust. So they're telling us that trust is really, really important. And then in a separate survey, 81% are saying, they need to know a lot about the organization before they're going to feel comfortable supporting it. That's a dimension of trust. And a roughly equal number are also saying nonprofits must earn my trust before I'm willing to support them. And so what do we mean by trust, right? That's sort of an amorphous concept. We look at it as really the answer to two fundamental questions. The first is donors deciding where and how I should give or volunteer to make an impact that I want to make for a given cause in a given community. Where do I do it? What's the best place to go? And then the second question related to trust is, once I do make that decision to volunteer or to give, what impact was actually achieved? What result, what outcome happened by virtue of my giving? So let's dig in a little bit further into this sort of notion of trust on the next slide. There's some interesting dynamics that we would argue are playing into the decline that we're seeing in trust. The first is the number of nonprofits has exploded. It's nearly up 50% over the last 20 years. And remember, the actual amount of giving is growing slowly. So the number of nonprofits and the growth in the number of nonprofits is vastly outpacing the growth in giving. What does that mean? Well, it means it makes it harder for organizations, funders, volunteers, individuals, corporates, foundations to decide which is the best place to give for a given impact, right? It just creates more confusion. And while there's obviously a positive side to more nonprofits attacking more specific causes and more specific communities, it has the downside of making it more difficult to make a decision on where to give. And then on the other side, and related to sort of that second question, the number of nonprofits that report that the ability to measure and report impact outcomes is a top priority is nearly 4 out of 5. But the number that have the ability to sort of consistently do it today is significantly less, roughly 1 in 5. And we believe that, sort of all of this is creating something of an erosion of trust, and that erosion of trust is manifesting to some extent in some of these near-term giving trends that we're seeing. So if that's the context, if that's the problem, and this is how we sort of see the root cause, what are we going to do about it? That's sort of the question. And that's what our team has been thinking about and grinding on in the last couple of months as we've been setting our strategy for the company and our strategy for our product. So let me talk a little bit about that from a Bonterra perspective. So on the next slide, when we break down the trust problem, we really break it down into sort of 4 things that we think are contributing to this idea of a vicious cycle of declining trust. So back to those 2 questions. The first being, where and how should I as a donor give my time and resources? There's 2 things that are impacting that, right? One is it's not easy to decide where I should give or volunteer, low visibility. It's not easy to match resources to needs. I talk to corporates, I talk to foundations, they're among our customers, and they all routinely say this. They all say we would like our employees, or we would like ourselves directly, to be able to give to smaller nonprofits in local communities. We don't have the ability to do that because we don't know enough about them. We don't have enough visibility. We don't have enough data, right? It's not easy to match resources with need. And then the other piece that sort of relates to that is it is hard for social good organizations to build effective relationships with donors at scale. And candidly, the technology solutions that have been put in place in some ways contribute to this, right? As a large donor, if you make a large gift and then the next day get an email asking you to make a $25 donation, that feels impersonal, disjointed, right? This nonprofit I want to work with doesn't really know me. And we believe that contributes to a lack of trust, right? So that's the where and how should I give part of the equation. And then back to what happens to the time and resources I give. There's two things donors care about here. One is, of course, that as much as is reasonable of my gift be used for impact, right? The efficiency with which my gift is used. But then also the ability for the nonprofit to tell me once I've made my gift, what actually happened as a result, right? How many people were fed? How many homeless were sheltered? What happened? What was the outcome? So as we think about what we're trying to achieve as a company throughout all of our products, it is attacking these four elements of what we believe are contributing to declining trust. And we think if we do that on the next slide, we can actually change it from a vicious circle to something of a virtuous circle, right? If we could create an environment where we had really high visibility, where supporters and donors could get all the information they need and see all of the social good organizations that are related to the specific cause, in the specific community that they wanted to make an impact, and it was all visible, that would make it easier, right? If we better equipped social good organizations with technology that enabled a much more personalized experience, right? That recognized that donors and volunteers and sustainers, they aren't all different people. Sometimes the same person could be all of those things. And we need to craft a single sort of collective relationship with that individual human. And when Russ talks in a bit with regard to our strategy for fundraising and engagement, you're going to see a lot of that, right? Building those very personal relationships. And we do believe that the technology approach that has been flawed in serving those causes for social good. And then on the other side of the coin, we want to automate the things that are administrative or low value so that the talented people within social good organizations can focus on truly valuable things, right? True things that are going to really make an impact for the causes that they're championing, and not babysit technology or do admin work because the tools are hard to use. And then finally, we want to provide the ability to consistently report impact in a manner that is consumable and understood by these large foundations, by these large corporations, so they can be excited to give more. These are the four dimensions of value that we are looking to invest in across our entire portfolio to drive this virtuous trust cycle. So on the next slide, if you look at where Bonterra is today, we have a number of different products, but broadly they fall into three major categories we call strategic philanthropy, impact management, and fundraising and engagement. Strategic philanthropy is about helping large funders, whether it's a corporate, a foundation, be able to give resources away, time or money. Impact management is about helping social good organizations manage their programs and report on their impact. And fundraising and engagement is about enabling social good organizations to manage relationships with their supporters. And today, we sort of treat all of those things as separate categories where there isn't really much of a connection between them. But that's not our vision, right? Our vision is, on the next slide, to put all of this together and create something of a self-reinforcing ecosystem that enables us to hit on those 4 things I described on that prior slide, right? And so what this would mean is, in impact management, when outcomes happen in the field, those results go back to the social good organizations, but also become visible as part of your fundraising, or to large corporates or foundations that are looking to find ways to make an impact. They'll be able to see that. They'll be able to get visibility into that, right? It will also enable social good organizations to see all of the different donors and foundations and corporates and their grants and things that they're investing in, right? That we have all of them as customers. We have relationships with all of them. We want to make those relationships visible to the social good organizations. And you know what? Those funders want that visibility into the social good organizations to make the matching problem that I was talking about easier. So this is what we're looking to bring together, enable all of this to come together to solve this problem of trust, create a virtuous cycle of trust, improve the quality of relationships, improve impact reporting, enable better visibility. All of that is what we're marching toward. Now, on the next slide, this naturally, as we talk about internally, we've created a slogan we call 3% by 33. And what we mean by that is we want to help the overall social good ecosystem in effect double over the next 10 years. This is what we call our big, hairy, audacious goal internally. And essentially our thesis is, if we can help improve trust, if we can improve the matching between people that want to give time and money away to the people that need time and money to make the impact they're seeking to make, that this is doable. Now, it requires us to bring all of these things together, which is something that, candidly, no other software company has been able to do or tried to do within social good, but that's what we're going to be trying to do. And 3% by 33 is our internal mantra and what we're trying to march towards over the next 10 years. Okay, so next slide. Before I hand it over to Russ, this is naturally going to create the question, okay, I understand from a big picture standpoint, but what does this mean for me, and what does this mean specifically for fundraising and engagement, right? One of our product categories, and product category that everybody here is interested in hearing about. So as I turn it over to Russ, he's going to help us talk through how what we're doing in fundraising and engagement and where we're going to be taking things over the next several years relate to this bigger vision for Bonterra, and how all of that will contribute to this big vision, this big goal of 3% by 33. So Russ, it is all yours, my friend.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott. And I'm really excited today to talk to you all about our vision for fundraising and engagement as we go forward. Just by way of very brief introduction, I have been with Bonterra for about 1.5 years now. I'm the SVP of product for fundraising and engagement. And I will be walking you through the vision today and where we're going. And I'm really, really excited about it. I think we all are here. And I think we'll be picking up on some of those elements of trust that Scott was just talking about. We think we can address all of those, but you'll be hearing from me in particular 2 of those. And that is the efficiency around the administration work, and then also addressing directly the transient relationships, the difficulty in forming and keeping meaningful relationships with supporters that last through time. So without further ado, let me go ahead and jump into it. First and foremost, I want to talk a little bit about the landscape that's out there today. Scott talked about it a little bit, so I'll dig in a little bit more on fundraising engagement. And when we look out there today, we see a couple things that have been happening. First of all, you see just an explosion in the number of point solutions that are out in the market over particularly the last decade, but certainly even longer. If you go back far enough, you can think about innovations like online giving, email automations, the rise of peer-to-peer text giving, crowdfunding, and on and on and on. And associated with all these point solutions then is just an explosion of data that is collected across all of these solutions. So you would think that would be a good thing. We have more specific solutions targeting specific problems, more ways to give with more data. So that should drive an improvement. But as we just saw, that hasn't been the case. It hasn't really moved the needle at all. And I think arguably, and I think many on the call may agree, that particularly over the last few years, it feels like it's even gotten harder. We just see fewer supporters volunteering their time or donating money. And what's holding that kind of percent of GDP steady is essentially fewer donors giving more money. And then also it's just so much difficulty in getting people to engage in volunteering, their time or their expertise as well. So something doesn't quite feel right there. And so I think if you dig in a little bit more here, what's going on? Well, first, the obvious kind of thing is we're just being buried in data. There's more and more data that's been collected. And it's collected across multiple point solutions. And it's very difficult to have even just a unified view of my supporters if the data and their associated pieces of it are in multiple places. But of course, it's not just enough to have the data in one place. You have to know what to do with it. What is this data telling me? What insights, what perspectives? How does this help me in my decision support and knowing what to do next? And it's very difficult to do that, and it drives a lot of the administrative burden that we were just talking about. And of course, this is exacerbating the stress on staff. I don't need to tell anyone here like how difficult it is, like how burnout is a problem is, while they're seeing more and more pressure for services and deliver that. And so what happens is that you start to fall back on one size fits all, or maybe we'll even say one size fits most messaging and volume. So we'll send a lot of emails or whatever the case is. When we were first researching this, one of the data points, not on the slide, but that jumped out at me was from the M&R benchmarks. And it said that the average supporter received a request for donation every 12 days from a nonprofit. If you donate to, say, 3 nonprofits, you can start to see how you'll get a request to donate literally every couple of days of every week, of every month, of every year. And that starts to, as a supporter, they can start perhaps to maybe tune that out a little bit, and it leads to some of the difficulties in the transient relationships there. And so that's one of the big data points there is we need to do a better job of driving insights of what do I need to do to drive decision-making. And I think the good news here is that this is also what supporters want. We see the rise of more connections like in a consumer world with brand affinity and wanting to know and understand the brands before they get involved in it. And I think that translates over here into nonprofit world as well. And I think specifically these rising generations, that's only going to increase. The oldest millennial, by the way, is now 42 years old. They're here and donating and getting involved. So let me pause there and we'll put out our first poll of the day. And we'll just in regards to technology, I called out a few challenges there that you may be facing. Curious for your feedback on which of those do you feel like you most face today? Is it disconnected tools, burnout staff, broken supporter relationships, or perhaps none of the above? But we will go ahead there. While you answer that, I'll go ahead and continue. But I think if you dig in here even more and say, like, why is this the case? Like, how did we get here today? I think first and foremost, we can go back to the CRM itself. CRMs, they've been out for at least 2 decades, perhaps longer. I think it's safe to say that it was created in the last century. And these are really originally data collection and data reporting tools. And there's something we think fundamentally wrong with how CRMs have been set up and designed and implemented today that we think we can address. So if you look first on the bottom of the left side of the slide, we talked a little bit about like siloed data. So I have my list of people who volunteer. I have my list of people who donate. Maybe others do advocacy or something else. But I run them separately, and even though they might be the same like human underneath that, what happens is we end up putting them in workflows. And those workflows could have some of the kind of the one size fits all or most messaging that I talked about. And then we're all familiar with, say, the donor pyramid, right? I give $25 for the first time to a nonprofit. I get put in at the bottom of that pyramid. And then the goal is to sort of to progress me up, donate again, maybe a higher amount, become a sustainer, and so on. Which is unrelated to any volunteering activities I may have, which is unrelated to activating my network, perhaps of friends and family. And Scott gave the example earlier of giving like a larger amount and then getting a fundraising email the next day asking for more money. It just leads to this like confusing and disjointed experience. And so we think that there's a different approach here. There is, we talked on the last slide about this is not what necessarily supporters want, and again, it's often the same people that are doing this work, but they're just in these kind of different workflows. And so we feel like there's an opportunity here to have a platform that builds a holistic view of supporter, not just kind of just my donors versus my volunteers. Build that holistic view and then understand them at a deeper level. So not just like demographically or who are you and where do you live, maybe some wealth screening, absolutely need those things, but that's also table stakes. We can start looking at like psychographic information, like what motivates you? Why did you get involved to begin with a nonprofit? And what keeps you going? Like what sustains you in your support of a nonprofit? And with this information, we can start to drive more personalized experiences, personalized messages. Maybe I like to receive emails and Scott likes to receive text messages. Even just basic things like that on the channels of like, I want to receive communications and then the message that I get it. And you get this approach that starts to move away from like just this kind of linear progression through a pyramid. And you start to see like a path forward that's not linear in nature. It's what we would call like multimodal. It's supporters kind of getting involved in different aspects in different ways, maybe ramping up their engagement, ramping down as their life experiences have it. An example of that could be I donate $25, but then next week I tag the social good organization on social media, and no one asked me to do it. I just did it because I felt affinity there. And I think if you look at it this way and you see that it's not just like progress like one step at a time, linear journeys, but it's a little bit more multimodal. There's an opportunity here to create something that will better engage with supporters. So let me ask you this question then. So I just talked on the last slide about the CRM-centric technology model, not keeping up with the needs kind of modern supporters and the way that they want to engage with social good organizations. Let me know what you think about that. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Kind of on the fence there. Let us know what you think. So with all of these pieces in mind, then our vision is to build a platform that unifies and enriches our view of supporters across every role they might play, and then arm our social good organizations with this deeper understanding and empower them to deliver unique experiences that are tailored specific to the supporter. And we call this the Supporter Experience Platform. And Supporter Experience Platform, as I talked about, has deeper and richer data of our supporter base, understanding who they are all the way down to their motivations, understanding their interests, their relationships, and building the profile out, and then using that information to build better supporter journeys that are tailored specifically to the individual versus having kind of like one size fits all messaging. And then the last piece there, and one that I'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes, is activating supporter networks. So if you just think about anyone on this call, their friends, family, work colleagues, past or present, all of us have an amazing and rich network of people that may want to get involved in a nonprofit. And we don't really do a very good job today of encouraging or making it easy for a supporter to activate that network. We don't really track it. We don't really measure it. The tools are kind of iffy at best there. And I think that's a huge untapped resource as well that will help us build that more personalized experience. And then on the left side of the slide there, you will see essentially how we start to think about bringing this vision to reality. I'm going to walk through each of these in more detail. But just to kind of cover them at a high level first, the first one is recruiting more supporters. So our supporter engagement experience should help you identify, find, and bring into your network more supporters that are great fits for your organization. Secondly, it should help you increase supporter engagement. If you have volunteered and not donated, it should help you identify those people and get them to donate for the first time. Perhaps they could advocate on your behalf as well, but just getting more in building deeper relationships with supporters. And then the third one is what I was just talking about a moment ago, which is then empowering supporters. At most all organizations have like their super supporters, the ones that are really, really involved, deeply motivated, and feel a passion for that mission. And we want to empower them to activate their network, to take up perhaps some bit of work on behalf of the social good organization, and be very thoughtful and very targeted towards those supporters to really help activate them. All of this underneath this will be underpinned, of course, by that unified supporter data and those very deep and rich supporter profiles that I talked about. So let's go through these one at a time. So if recruit more supporters, increase supporter engagement, and empowering supporters, again, this is how we would expect you all to experience value in our product. So these are like our three main like value drivers, if you want to think about it that way, that are at the core of our supporter experience platform. And so if we focus first on recruiting more supporters, how we think about advancing that and where we want to build and focus our efforts as we build out our supporter experience platform is there on the right. And these are really two areas that we'll be focusing more and more on as we go forward. So first is proactively recruiting new supporters. And that word proactive is very intentional. We already can recruit supporters today. We can have a donation form. Perhaps we put out a petition. We can maybe improve SEO to maybe increase ourselves in Google PageRank. But we want to be very thoughtful and very intentional. And the way that we're thinking about doing that is to understand, as I've talked about, our supporters on a much deeper profile, and then build kind of like supporter models against potential donors, potential volunteers, ones with good engagement. And then having the messaging in place that you can easily take advantage of to tailor very specific messages and a very specific channel to very specific people that we've helped you identify. And then integrating with third-party platforms to be able to have that message out. And then you should be able to use our platform to measure the efficacy of that, adjust as you go, and we'll help you with data insights so that we can become a meaningful channel for you to help you build net new supporters in your organization. The second one there is expanding reach in the Bonterra ecosystem. Scott talked about this a few moments ago, but we have just a wealth of information and other products. And when you join Bonterra and you're using our supporter engagement platform, we want you to feel like you've joined something big, something that can really help you put a little wind in your sails and start making connections to help you expand your network and expand your reach. That could be, gaining visibility with 20 million supporters that we have, being able to create an event and publish it on maybe a supporter profile like Mobilize, for example. But just taking advantage of all of the synergies and all of the interactions that we have at Bonterra and helping you make those connections to drive more supporters to your network. Second one, increasing supporter engagement. So when we think about this and you experiencing kind of value in the product here, the two areas that we're focusing very specifically on, first is driving intelligent engagement actions. So we've touched on this a little bit, having specific true 360 supporter views, understanding all the data points that come from a supporter and having that in a single place. And then taking that data and turning it into actions. We talked about this a little bit before. Just having the data for data's sake isn't actually all that helpful. You need to know what to do with it. You need to know, like, what should my next move be? How does this inform or insight or help me achieve my goals that I'm trying to do with this product? And so you can expect us then to start weaving those into workflows and helping you make better decisions and optimizing your engagement plans. to improve the problem with efficiency that we talked about earlier. Then the last piece there around extending your engagement, we want our platforms to be at the center of your tech ecosystem. And what that means in practice is we want to encourage and enable others to build on and innovate on our platform. And that's going to be a win-win because it helps build out and extend like your solutions, and then also it helps us take the supporter data that may come from those solutions and build it into ours in that total view. In practical means, that means you can expect to see us build out and spend more time on building out APIs and just making it easier to innovate on our products. And then the second area that we'll be focusing here is reducing the barriers to engagement. Think about any of the friction that a supporter might experience, for example, when they're interacting. So that could be anything from like not having a form pre-populated with their information, or maybe needing to go through too many clicks to get to what like we're looking for them to do. We want to make it very, very easy to engage. We talked about the right message at the right channel at the right time, and then when they're there, making it incredibly as easy as possible to engage with you. You can see things like more investment in fast action and more expansion of fast action. And then the second piece there is around really optimizing, creating A/B testing and other benchmarks to help you understand kind of where you are. So it's not just enough that like, okay, my conversion rate on a donation form is X. How do I get that to Y? Or for my similar peers, what is their donation rate, and how, like, what are they doing that's best practices? We can help you understand that to improve your conversion, and again, reduce those barriers to engagement. Again, because as you'll hear me say many times, we have the data here that we can really take advantage of that to help you become more effective. And then the third one, and again, I mentioned this, I'm quite excited about this one, is really creating supporter-led interaction. So I mentioned a few moments ago about just if you pause and think about like how large each of our networks are, you know, I have a hypothesis that you could have really high, well-engaged, well-connected supporters that if all they do for you is just activate their network and get their friends, family, colleagues to get involved, to donate or volunteer, even if that person personally doesn't actually donate or volunteer, they could still be one of your top supporters. But you may not know that today. We don't measure that. We don't necessarily think about it that way. And we can address that directly. And that's an amazing opportunity in my mind to expand you know, your supporter network. You'll also see us investing more in peer-to-peer events. Peer-to-peer is a great trust signal for nonprofits. If someone that I trust and respect is involved in a nonprofit, that's going to make me far more likely to get involved myself because I have that peer validation there. We need to be able to take advantage of that. And then I talked a little bit about just taking advantage of or enabling supporters to pick up some of the work and on behalf of a nonprofit. So you'll see us invest in some of our phone banking tools, our canvassing tools, who is doing that hard work on behalf of you. And then understanding and measuring that value that you're associating with it, because again, if you're not measuring it or you're not thinking about it, you can improve it. And so the peer benchmarking that I talked about, this is another great area where we can help improve and advance there. So we talked about this a little bit before. We are one of the, perhaps the only company in the world that we think can actually put this together. We have the ability to touch supporters along every moment of their journey, and every time they interact in any way. We have the tools, the capabilities, and the products to be able to do that. And we have an amazing wealth of information with over 20 million supporters, 30,000 event and opportunity volunteering opportunities last year. We're approaching 20 billion in donations and over 20,000 social good organizations. So we have the data, we have the products, we have the vision, and this is where we're going with fundraising engagement over the next few years to build this and bring the supporter experience platform to you to help you better understand and deliver a unique experience to your supporters, which we believe will help arrest the decline of supporter engagement. So, third poll here, let me ask you a question. How aligned do you think that this vision is to your needs? What you are looking to accomplish, your goals, the challenges that you have, how well aligned is this vision to addressing your pain points and meeting your goals and your challenges that you're facing today? And while you're answering that, one of probably the first questions that you might have is, great, when can I have this, or when am I going to see this? So I wanted to touch on that a little bit here as well. So first and foremost, there's really two things that we're doing this quarter that are critically important. One is gearing up and being ready to support you during giving season. And that is obviously our top priority going through this quarter, getting ready for that. The second thing that the team is doing, though, is we are working on turning this vision into roadmap, very specific roadmap. So what specifically are you going to do? And when am I going to start seeing some value from this? Our plan is to spend this quarter aligning our 2024 roadmap to this vision. And then in January, come and essentially do this again, but on a deeper level, and get into like, where are we going to do in 2024, walk through our roadmap, walk through the value behind it, how those roadmap items align back to the vision and some of like the value themes that I was talking about. So we wanted to offer you a seat in this now if you are interested. So if you would like to attend this webinar, it's not on the calendar yet, it's not scheduled, but it will be shortly. If you say yes to this, we are going to go ahead and just enroll you in that, try to make it reduce barriers to engagement and make it as easy as possible for you to attend that. So if you say yes there, you will be enrolled to hear us talk about what we're doing from a roadmap perspective and where we're going in 2024 in January. And then the second thing to talk about here is we are going to be forming a targeted customer group to get feedback on some adjacent things that I've been talking about today. So we are looking at new product packages for F&E, and then also new service offerings. And we are looking for folks who are interested in engaging in this, essentially getting a sneak peek or an early preview of how we're thinking about it. And then having an opportunity to provide feedback for it. So kind of like on the last one, if you say yes, you'll be enrolled here. If you are interested in talking with us about how we're thinking about product packages, how we're thinking about our service offerings, or both, that'd be great. Go ahead and respond there, and then we'll be following up to you.
And Russ, just jumping in real quick here, because I just had the opportunity to go through a handful of the questions. There were some questions on things like training. Those are going to be part of some of these new service packages that we're looking to put together. And so for those of you that have expressed some interest in things like training or having, more dedicated concierge level support, that these would be great to get your feedback on, because those are along the lines of the dimensions of these new offerings. And then a number of folks are naturally asking questions about their specific products, whether it's Network for Good or Every Action. The product packaging will help answer some of that as well, and how all these different products are playing together to achieve this vision. So if that's on your mind, this may be an interesting thing for you to contribute to as well.
Very good. Excellent. Looking forward to engagement and participation there as well. So that does it for me for the F&E vision, building out your supporter experience platform, helping you better understand your supporter base, helping you attract and recruit new ones, and then better create sustaining relationships with them that will help build trust and can help you keep those relationships as you go, and then become more efficient as well. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Amanda.
Awesome. Thank you, Russ, and thank you, Scott, so much. We probably have time for just a couple of questions. I know there are a ton in there. Thank you so much for asking. We'll save all of them. We'll get to your questions as best we can. But I wanted to maybe ask some of the ones that I saw some themes throughout the many questions. So this kind of goes to what you were both just talking about. But Russ, like what does this mean for every action? Are you going to build a new platform, or like what does that future really look like?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great question. So just to address that directly, we are not building a net new platform that's different from every action or say Network for Good. What we are talking about though is adjusting how we think about those platforms and adjusting the work that we do on those platforms to turn them into supporter engagement platforms. Again, that can do all of the things that I was talking about, helping third parties kind of build and innovate on that. But it's not going to be a net new platform. We'll be adjusting, say, every action, for example, over the next few years to meet this vision.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And you said, kind of over the next few years, right? Which there were a lot of questions kind of about future state, right? And, this is the vision now, but how do you see this vision evolving, or where will you be focusing next year? Like how can they see that linear path?
Yeah, good question too. Again, maybe a quick plug to sign up for the January webinar, but just to maybe perhaps as a sneak peek there. I think you'll see us focusing a lot of effort in 2024 is around the investment areas of intelligent engagement actions and reduce barriers to engagement. So for example, on every action, we're looking very hard at like the navigation and the usability of the product. We're going to go pretty hard after WCAG next year as well. And then we have just a wealth of data, as I talked about, and data science. And so you'll start to see more like augmented suggestions and kind of like things along the way of your workflow to help you maybe in the moment make a more informed decision. You'll also see us invest more in some payments as well. I talked briefly before. We want to investing more in fast action, broadening out the ability or the where fast action can apply. And so you'll see, and then the last piece that we're looking at too is like the friction associated with the asks. So that's donation forms, for example, continuing to optimize those donation forms, running A/B tests there. If you're sending out something for like volunteering, like can we make that very easy, maybe like one click to just go ahead and like volunteer or invite a friend, something like that. You'll see that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Russ. I think we probably have time for maybe one more question here. Scott wanted to say some final words and wrap up. So I want to be sure we give us some time for that, or if there's anything, Scott, that you see that you want to make sure we address. But I'll go with kind of like a fun, maybe more specific one with let's go with AI, right? What are you planning around the world of AI and ML, and do we expect to see that in the Bonterra vision?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's on everybody's mind. Our vision is not, we are not able to hit our vision in the long run without really strong AI, ML, and the data science to back that up. We have a great internal data science team here, and all of the pieces that I was talking about in terms of like, optimizing decision making, taking friction out, improving efficiencies, personalized experiences, that's all going to be driven on data and really like machine learning associated with that. So we are kind of like partly from the prior question, like helping you make more informed decisions, which will help optimize your workflows. All of these pieces that you're going to start seeing, and you're going to just see more and more of it as it rolls out as well. I'll have more to say on that in January, but absolutely, it's absolutely core to our long-term vision.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Russ, and definitely keep an eye out, folks, for those follow-up sessions in January. Whatever questions we might not have gotten to here, we'll definitely get to there and get a little bit more granular. But Scott, I wanted to make sure you had some time just to close out. Thank you both so much for sharing this vision for the fundraising and engagement group. Super excited to see where we're going, and thank you so much for putting your time and effort into this for our customers.
Well, thank you, Amanda, and thanks to all of the customers for carving out time with us today. The feedback through the polls is going to be immensely important. And this is the beginning of what we hope is going to be an intensive conversation between us and you all over the course of 2024. In some ways, this is really the beginning of Bonterra and what we're trying to achieve. So I recognize, looking through all the questions, people are naturally asking for the next level of detail down around specific products and specific services and specific timing. And we're going to answer all those questions, right? And that's going to be the purpose of the future webinars. We're also going to be looking to do things like user events, advisory board, product councils, more and more engagement. And I'm going to try to spend as much time individually with as many customers as possible as well. So really excited to be getting into this, really excited with this as sort of the start, and really appreciate the time and the attention and the comments and the participation here today.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you in our next sessions. I hope you all have a great rest of your, I think it's Tuesday. Can't keep track of days anymore. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and keep doing the greatest good out there. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks all.